Picture the endless horizon of the Mediterranean. The sound of creaking oars, the rhythmic splash of hundreds of paddles striking the water, and the sharp commands of naval officers echo across the decks of Rome's great warships. These men were not infantrymen trained to march in formation across dusty roads. They were sailors of the Misenum naval fleet, hardened by storms, salt spray, and the unforgiving discipline of the sea. Their daily lives were spent tightening ropes, hauling sails, and rowing until their muscles burned. They knew the smell of pitch and tar, better than that of leather armor or iron shields. Yet in the turbulent year of AD 68, these seamen were suddenly called to fight a different kind of war. The Roman world was in chaos. Emperor Nero had taken his own life, leaving the throne of the greatest empire on earth empty and contested. Civil war spread like wildfire. Rome needed soldiers, fast, but training a new legion from scratch normally took years of recruitment, drilling, and discipline. There was no time for that. In this moment of crisis, the new ruler, Servius Sulpicius Galba, turned to the men of the fleet. They were already organized, already used to harsh conditions and strict command. They possessed the endurance of rowers, the courage of sailors who faced storms and sudden naval battles. If anyone could be forged into an emergency fighting force, it was them. From these sailors, a new legion was born, Legio II Adiutrix, the Second Helper Legion. Their name captured their very purpose. Adiutrix, the helper, the reinforcer. They were not originally raised to conquer new provinces or guard a quiet frontier. They were created to save the empire itself during one of the most dangerous power struggles in Roman history. This unlikely transformation, from the spray of the sea to the dust of the battlefield, would define their character for centuries to come. From their first march onto dry land, these former sailors began a journey that would carry them to the Rhine, to Britain, and to the stormy Danube, leaving an indelible mark on the story of Rome. When the sailors of the Misenum fleet first stepped onto the parade ground, they were entering a world very different from the decks of their ships. The man who summoned them, Servius Sulpicius Galba, had only recently seized power after Nero's death. Galba was an experienced commander and former governor of Hispania, but his hold on the empire was fragile. He faced mutinous troops, ambitious rivals, and provinces ready to rebel. To survive, he needed a force that could be trusted immediately, not one that required years of training or divided loyalties. The men of the fleet offered exactly that. They were disciplined, used to obeying orders without question, and, most importantly, unconnected to the political intrigues of the legions already stationed along the empire's frontiers. By drawing from the navy, Galba could create a fresh unit, owing its existence directly to him, rather than to long-standing provincial commanders or rival claimants to the throne. Their transition from sailors to soldiers was swift and uncompromising. Naval service had hardened their bodies and minds, but legionary life demanded new skills. The relentless drill of marching in tight formation, the weight of the scutum shield, the precision of the pilum throwing spear. Roman centurions wasted no time, driving the recruits through punishing exercises to transform them from oarsmen into infantry. This new formation was officially named Legio II Adiutrix, the Second Helper. The title signaled both their status as an auxiliary reinforcement and their critical role in propping up Galba's shaky rule. Within months, they were no longer merely a stopgap measure. They had become a fully fledged legion, carrying the proud eagle's standard and the expectations of an emperor desperate to hold his throne. Unbeknown to Galba, the very men he armed would soon witness another rapid turn of fortune, as the empire's deadly game of succession continued to unfold around them. No sooner had Legio II Adiutrix begun to take shape than the political ground shifted beneath their feet. Galba's rule, already fragile, collapsed with startling speed. In January of AD 69, barely 7 months after Nero's death, Galba was assassinated on the streets of Rome, cut down by soldiers who believed his harsh discipline and refusal to pay the promised donative had betrayed them. The sailors turned legionaries, still drilling in their new formations, suddenly found themselves without the very emperor who had created them. The empire now entered a whirlwind known to history as the Year of the Four Emperors, a brutal contest for the purple in which 4 different men would claim supreme power in a single year. After Galba's death, the Senate hailed Otho, a former ally turned rival, as the next emperor. The second helper initially swore allegiance to him, as did many units desperate for stability. But Otho's reign proved short and bloody. He marched north to confront the forces of Vitellius, a powerful commander whose Rhine legions proclaimed him emperor in opposition. The young legion faced a test of loyalty before they had even fought their first major battle. They were ordered to support Otho's campaign, yet the tide of war quickly turned. Vitellius's hardened German legions crushed Otho's forces at the Battle of Bedriacum, forcing Otho to take his own life. Once again, the second helper had to adapt, transferring their oath to Vitellius to remain part of the legitimate Roman army. But even Vitellius would not hold the throne for long. In the east, the seasoned general Vespasian, already commanding powerful forces in Judea, declared his own claim. His legions marched west, defeating Vitellius's supporters and capturing Rome by the end of the year. When the dust settled, the Flavian dynasty emerged victorious, and Legio II Adiutrix once more shifted its allegiance, this time to a ruler whose grip on power would finally endure. For the second helper, survival demanded flexibility. Before their eagle standard had even weathered its first winter, they had sworn loyalty to 3 different emperors, a baptism of politics as much as of war. With Vespasian firmly on the throne, the chaos of civil war began to settle. For Legio II Adiutrix, this meant their first true deployment beyond the parade ground. No longer the uncertain creation of a fallen emperor, they were now a recognized part of Rome's standing army, and Rome had urgent need of them on the northern frontier. The Rhine provinces were still restless. Only a few years earlier, the Batavi, a powerful tribal group occupying the river delta of modern-day Netherlands, had risen in revolt. Led by the charismatic chieftain Julius Civilis, Batavian warriors had seized Roman forts and threatened to sever Rome's control of the region. Although the worst of the uprising had been crushed by the time the second helper arrived, the Rhine frontier remained unstable. Vespasian sent the new legion to help suppress lingering resistance and to reassert imperial authority along this critical border. For the sailors turned soldiers, Germany offered their first taste of campaigning in hostile territory. They marched through dense forests and across marshy lowlands, landscapes far removed from the sunlit harbors of the Mediterranean. Here the Danube and Rhine rivers were not trade routes but lifelines, carrying supplies and reinforcements through lands where Roman control ended only a day's march from the fort walls. Their naval background gave them an advantage. They understood boats, bridges, and the movement of men and equipment across fast-moving water. Engineers and legionaries worked side by side to repair river crossings, build fortified camps, and secure supply lines. Though few pitched battles are recorded for this period, the work was no less demanding. Endless patrols, sudden skirmishes with tribal raiders, and the relentless construction of roads and ramparts hardened the legion into a professional fighting force. By the time the Rhine frontier was stabilized, Legio II Adiutrix had proven that their origins as sailors were no handicap. They were now soldiers in every sense, disciplined, experienced, and ready for the next challenge that the empire would place before them. With the Rhine frontier stabilized, Rome turned its attention to another restless province, Britain. This far-flung island, wreathed in mist and surrounded by cold northern seas, represented the very edge of the known world to Roman eyes. Its rugged hills and fierce tribes had defied conquest for over a generation, and the empire needed reliable troops to secure the gains made by earlier campaigns. For Legio II Adiutrix, the call to Britain marked another great leap in their transformation, from sailors to seasoned legionaries. The journey itself was a test of endurance. From the Rhine Valley, the legion marched west to the Channel coast, then crossed the treacherous waters to the Roman port of Rutupii, modern Richborough, in Kent. For men who once served on warships, the sea voyage may have felt strangely familiar, but the land awaiting them was anything but. Britain's damp climate, long winter nights, and thick forests offered challenges as harsh as any enemy. Once ashore, the Second Helper was tasked with building and defending the expanding network of Roman forts and roads that anchored imperial control. Archaeological evidence suggests detachments of the legion assisted in the construction of key fortifications in northern England, including sites along what would later become the line of Hadrian's Wall. Their engineering skills, sharpened first in the Navy and later along the Rhine, proved invaluable for bridging rivers, laying roads through boggy ground, and erecting strong stone camps. Combat was never far away. Britain's native tribes, from the Brigantes of the north to smaller confederations in the west, launched periodic raids that kept the legion alert and blooded. Each patrol, each skirmish, added to their growing reputation as a dependable, hard-fighting unit. By the time orders came to redeploy once more, the men of Legio II Adiutrix had marched from the sunlit harbors of Italy to the fog-shrouded frontier of Britain, proof that the sailors of Misenum had become true soldiers of the empire. After years of service in distant Britain, Legio II Adiutrix received new orders that would define its role for centuries to come. The legion was transferred to the Danube frontier, one of the most strategically vital and dangerous boundaries of the Roman world. Here, along the broad river that divided the empire from the restless tribes of Central and Eastern Europe, the soldiers of Adiutrix would find both a permanent home and an unending challenge. Their destination was the province of Pannonia, a region covering parts of modern Hungary, Austria, and the Balkans. By the end of the 1st century, Rome faced constant pressure from peoples beyond the river, Dacians, Sarmatians, and various Germanic groups who tested the defenses with raids and sudden incursions. To meet these threats, the empire needed strong, experienced legions capable of both rapid action and heavy construction. Adiutrix, hardened by the forests of Germany and the wet hills of Britain, was perfectly suited for the task. The legion established its main base at Aquincum, near today's Budapest. From this fortress they patrolled the riverbanks, built watchtowers, and maintained a chain of roads and forts that allowed Rome to move troops quickly along the frontier. Their earlier naval background once again proved valuable. They understood rivers, boats, and the logistics of transporting men and supplies across powerful currents. On the Danube, these skills could mean the difference between repelling an invasion and losing a province. Life on the frontier was a relentless cycle of preparation and sudden action. Detachment forces of Adiutrix fought skirmishes against Sarmatian horsemen, repaired flood-damaged fortifications, and trained new recruits drawn from the surrounding provinces. Every wall they raised, every bridge they reinforced, became another link in the defensive chain that protected the heart of the empire. By the close of the 1st century, Legio II Adiutrix had settled into its long-term role as the shield of the Middle Danube. From their stronghold at Aquincum, they would remain a key presence for generation after generation, watching the wide river that marked the uneasy edge of Roman power. At the dawn of the 2nd century, the empire called once more, and Legio II Adiutrix answered. The ambitious Emperor Trajan, himself a seasoned soldier, sought to end the long struggle with the Dacians, a powerful kingdom north of the Danube in what is now Romania. The Dacians, under their formidable king Decebalus, had repeatedly challenged Roman authority, raiding across the river and threatening the stability of Pannonia and Moesia. For Trajan, victory over Dacia promised not only security, but also immense wealth from the region's rich gold mines. From their fortress at Aquincum, The soldiers of Legio II Adiutrix joined a massive imperial force assembling along the Danube. Their years of frontier duty had prepared them well. They knew the river, they knew the terrain, and they knew how to fight in harsh conditions. As Trajan began his first campaign in 101 CE, Adiutrix marched across the great river on enormous timber bridges built by the genius engineer Apollodorus of Damascus, structures that became symbols of Rome's engineering supremacy. The fighting was brutal. Dacian warriors were skilled in mountain warfare, using the rugged Carpathian landscape to their advantage. Yet Legio II Adiutrix, hardened by decades of service from the fogs of Britain to the marshes of the Danube, proved its worth in siege operations and open battle alike. They helped capture key fortresses, secure river crossings, and cut off Dacian supply lines. Trajan's first campaign ended with a temporary peace, but when Decebalus broke the treaty in 105 CE, Adiutrix marched again. The second campaign brought final victory. The fall of the Dacian capital Sarmizegetusa in 106 CE marked one of Rome's greatest triumphs, celebrated in the reliefs of Trajan's column in Rome. For Legio II Adiutrix, the Dacian Wars meant glory, rich spoils, and the honor of helping to expand the empire's borders to their greatest extent. Their banners returned to Aquincum, not merely as guardians of the Danube, but as veterans of one of the most celebrated conquests in Roman history. After the hard-fought victories in Dacia, the empire entered a period of consolidation under Emperor Hadrian. For Legio II Adiutrix, this marked a shift from expansion to steady defense and infrastructure along the empire's northern borders. No longer chasing enemies across distant lands, the legion's focus turned to maintaining security, training new recruits, and strengthening the Danube frontier. Hadrian, a meticulous administrator, emphasized fortifications, roads, and supply lines. Legio II Adiutrix contributed significantly to this effort, improving camps, watchtowers, and river crossings throughout Pannonia and Moesia. The legion's experience with both engineering and logistics, skills honed first on ships, then in Germany and Britain, made them invaluable in implementing Hadrian's vision of a secure and organized frontier. During these quieter decades, Adiutrix also served a vital political and cultural role. Their presence stabilized the province, protected trade routes, and helped integrate local populations into the Roman system. Soldiers were involved in construction projects, from roads linking fortresses to civilian settlements to the maintenance of aqueducts and bridges along the Danube. Inscriptions and archaeological remains at Aquincum confirm their continued activity, highlighting barracks, workshops, and training grounds that supported both military and civic life. Though the empire was largely at peace along this sector, danger remained ever present. Tribal raids across the Danube were sporadic, but could escalate quickly. Legio II Adiutrix remained vigilant, conducting patrols, manning outposts, and preparing younger soldiers for the rigors of frontier service. The discipline and versatility instilled over decades, from sailors to legionaries, ensured that the legion could respond swiftly to any threat. These quiet years allowed the legion to consolidate its identity, blending centuries of experience into a force capable of enduring the political and military challenges of the 2nd century. By the time new threats emerged on the horizon, Legio II Adiutrix was not only a battle-hardened unit, but also a cornerstone of Rome's northern defensive system, ready to face the next wave of conflict. Marcomannic Wars, defending the empire. By the mid-2nd century, Rome faced a renewed threat along the Danube. A coalition of Germanic tribes, including the Marcomanni, Quadi, and Sarmatians, tested the limits of Roman power. Emperor Marcus Aurelius, renowned for both his intellect and military skill, called upon the frontier legions to defend the empire. Among them, Legio II Adiutrix Legio Adiutrix was dispatched once more to hold the line and confront enemies determined to breach the Roman frontier. For Adiutrix, the Marcomannic Wars were unlike any conflict they had faced before. These campaigns demanded constant movement, endurance, and adaptability across forests, rivers, and marshlands that could swallow unprepared troops. Battles were often irregular, hit-and-run raids, ambushes, and skirmishes rather than pitched confrontations. The legion's engineers played a crucial role, constructing temporary fortifications, bridges, and roads to allow rapid redeployment along the Danube. The soldiers of Legio II Adiutrix drew upon decades of experience. From rowing in the Mycenum fleet to campaigns in Germany, Britain, and Dacia, they had honed both discipline and versatility. Their presence stabilized vulnerable regions, repelled raiders, and demonstrated Rome's enduring military capacity, even when facing highly mobile, unpredictable enemies. Inscriptions and military diplomas from this era attest to the legion's active participation. Detachments were deployed not only to the front lines, but also to guard critical crossings and secure supply chains, ensuring the empire could sustain a prolonged conflict. The legion's endurance and organization became legendary among the tribes along the Danube. Though the wars dragged on for years, Legio II Adiutrix emerged with its reputation intact. The Marcomannic campaigns reinforced the legion's identity as a reliable, disciplined, and multifaceted force. They were no longer merely former sailors or emergency recruits. They were a permanent pillar of Roman military power, capable of defending the empire against the harshest challenges along one of its most vulnerable borders. As the 3rd century dawned, the Roman Empire faced new challenges: internal upheavals, succession crises, and relentless pressure from invading tribes. For Legio II Adiutrix, the Danube frontier remained a critical post, but the world around them was changing. The legion, once forged from sailors and tempered in civil war, now had to adapt to shifting political and military realities. Records from this period are sparse, yet inscriptions and archaeological evidence show that Adiutrix remained active in Pannonia and Moesia well into the 3rd century. Detachments guarded forts, patrolled rivers, and assisted in logistics and infrastructure, continuing the dual role of soldier and engineer that had defined the legion since its creation. While Rome's central authority wavered, Adiutrix maintained discipline, serving as a stabilizing force in a region vulnerable to both external and internal threats. The legion's identity evolved alongside the empire. No longer solely a striking force, Adiutrix became a flexible frontier garrison, capable of rapid deployment, construction, and local policing. Their long tenure along the Danube allowed them to mentor younger recruits and integrate auxiliary units, passing down the skills and traditions of a legion that had begun as naval personnel. Though the eventual fate of Legio II Adiutrix remains uncertain, its legacy endures. Archaeological sites like Aquincum, with barracks, bathhouses, and river fortifications, bear witness to the legion's presence. Inscriptions, building dedications, and military diplomas record the names of officers and soldiers who upheld Rome's authority for generations. The legion's story is one of adaptability, endurance, and service, transforming from sailors to soldiers, from emergency recruits to a cornerstone of the empire's northern defenses. From the stormy waters of the Mediterranean to the fog-shrouded forests of Britain, and finally to the wide Danube frontier, Legio II Adiutrix left an indelible mark on the Roman world. Their journey reminds us that the strength of Rome was not just in its emperors or generals, but in the men who carried its standards, marched in its ranks, and defended its borders against all odds.